Good evening, I'm Chase Bailey of Left Bank Films, and our podcast called The Love of Film. Tonight's episode is episode 4, where we discuss the best actors of the 1940s. Tonight's podcasters are Kate Jurdy, Brigitte Abrieu, Dennis Collins Johnson, Todd Hunter, Freeman Fletcher, and myself, Chase Bailey. We will discuss our top 2 actors. My favorite actor, since I'm up first, my number 2 pick is Cary Grant. Cary Grant, who did Philadelphia Story, Arsenic and Old Lace, Bishop's Wife, Suspicion, Girl Friday, the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
Cary Grant did enormous amount of work in the 40s, and I loved his work, whether it was dark, whether it was comedic, and then even in Suspicion, he did a good thriller. He did well with that, with Hitchcock. So, and Girl Friday, I didn't even mention, did I? But he did 23 films in the 1940s. 23 films in the 1940s.
Busy guy.
Oh my God. Well, anyway, I love Cary Grant. Cary Grant's my number 2 choice for Best Actor.
I always felt like George Clooney would be like the perfect star to play Cary Grant in the movie.
He would, wouldn't he?
I think he has a lot of the same
George
energy.
Clooney.
Yeah.
A younger George Clooney.
Yeah.
Get me George Clooney. Yeah.
But Brigitte, what is your number 2 choice?
My number 2 is Cary Grant. I love that man. What I love about him, I was reflecting on this as I was preparing for this. What I love about him is how versatile he is. And, not even in terms of the kinds of characters he played, because he tended to play the same kind of character. But as an actor, I feel like he can bring it really, really big and really, really subtle. And I never felt like he was being inappropriate with either size in terms of how he would, portray a character in anything, in, his Girl Friday and the wonderful Arsenic and Old Lace, which we love. He's so good at maintaining energy through the whole thing, but you don't feel like he's pushing ever. And that's so hard to do.
He was comfortable.
Yeah.
He was comfortable in his roles.
He was always so competent, and he generally played very competent characters as well. But there's just something about Cary Grant. I don't know. It's
you think
real skill
about it,
there.
Arsenic, Suspicion. He played in Hitchcock, Suspicion.
Yes.
And then he did Bishop's Wife, which we all love.
Yes.
The Philadelphia Story and Girl Friday.
And what a perfect example of his range to go from Suspicion to Arsenic and Old Lace.
Yeah.
And there are my 2 favorite directors, my 2 directors on the list, their movies. And he's so perfect. He fits into both. It's incredible. He can do that subtlety of and yet he can do the really big what, that is the Arsenic and Old Lace kind of vibe. And I've always admired him as an actor.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, he was my number 2 also.
Hey!
Yes. So Todd, your number 2 choice for Best Actor.
My number 2 choice for Best Actor was chosen because there'd be no other decade I could choose this actor. And it seems like a sin as someone who does both theater and film to not have this actor be given at least the accolades he should. And that would be Laurence Olivier. Oh. He capped off the decade with Rebecca. And he is just absolutely, just the way he delivers the lines, and it's like silk. He's a very mannered, theatrical way about him, obviously, but he was also so groundbreaking, and he bridged he bridged theater and film in his own way. it was before Brando, it was before Method, and of course there's the whole classic, story in the 70s between Olivier and Hoffman. My boy, why don't you just simply act? And Olivier, along, in terms of that very classic, and I don't use classic in a derogative term by any way, and it's kind of a catch-all, but nobody could deliver Shakespeare like Olivier. Even though I love Branagh, he's a very different type of. He delivers a Shakespeare in a different way. He understands it, and I would say in a different way than, say, Olivier did. And just the fact that he was in both Henry V and Hamlet, both in the 1940s. Later on, I think it's 1945 and 1948. He was the quintessential screen Hamlet and Henry V until Branagh. And I mean, Olivier's Hamlet is so well known. He even shows up in Schwarzenegger's Last Action Hero at one point. He's just
not to be.
Yes, well, not to be. So I think in terms of, I don't think he was primarily a film actor. I think Olivier is primarily known for stage, but the two mediums have more similarities than not. Both to their both to their positives and also to their detriment, I should say. And I think it's important to mention Olivier's contributions in the 1940s of his acting and how many strove to be like him. So that's why my pick for number 2 is Laurence Olivier. And if I'm going to put Laurence Olivier for number 2, wait until you hear who's number 1.
Oh, fantastic!
Sorry.
Hamlet was my choice for favorite film.
Yeah,
less Casablanca.
That's right.
And Citizen Kane. And I loved his performance in that. I don't know if you guys have seen The Tragedy of Macbeth.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, I saw that.
Chomping at the bit.
Oh my gosh, what a great film. But anyway,
Is that Denzel you talking about?
Yeah, Denzel and Francis McDormand.
Where would you put David Tennant there, if anywhere?
David Tennant's right up there in the top. But remember, I mentioned one of my favorite Hamlets, after of course Olivier, is Richard Burton when he did it on stage in New York.
It's interesting because my professor actually liked David Tennant's better. This is very controversial, better than Laurence Olivier's Hamlet. So I'm wondering, Todd, if you had seen his Hamlet, what you thought of his work, his Hamlet and Shakespeare.
I actually haven't. I mean, I like David Tennant. I don't think it's that controversial to say that your professor, did he say he preferred it, or he bar none, he's far better than Olivia?
She really had a thing for David Tennant, and I think she liked, I'm going to say maybe the modernization of it, because the reality was that, as you know, Hamlet was essentially midlife at the time it was written, and even it's not midlife. I mean, he was still a kid at the time Olivier did it, but he really kind of brought to light the fact that this is like a college stage kid, so and I think she really, the modernization of it, and Royal Shakespeare Company, we watched a lot of those in our class. There was Sir Patrick Stewart was in a lot of them. He's in Hamlet, and she just, I think it was a different style of acting too that Tennant brought to the table. So I think but I love it.
I enjoyed Tennant's version very well. I mean, it's so hard to differentiate.
Yeah, I don't like to compare.
It almost gets down to, apples and oranges. Which do you like better?
I agree. I just thought it was interesting that
fruits. Yeah.
That's the beauty of Hamlet, and that's why it's hard to compare.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a performance that, and not a lot of, I don't think there are a lot of Shakespeare characters, at least to the level of Hamlet, that can be interpreted in so many different ways. It's a very odd play, actually.
Well, if you think about it, to be and not to be basically defines the whole film. Who is Hamlet?
Yeah.
He is stuck in this netherworld between two different people, and how much are you going to show on one side and how much you're going to show on the other? And it's very difficult. When I was doing the play, of course, I didn't know shit. I was young, and I had a director that probably didn't know what in the fuck he was doing.
God.
But we did the play, and I enjoyed it, and that's why it's one of my favorite plays of all time.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I think that I just found it interesting that my professor appreciated and actually enjoyed Tenet more than Olivier. I think she had a little crush on Tenet too, but
How did you not?
he was, yeah, he is hot. He's yummy, right?
I honestly really enjoyed Ethan Hawke as Hamlet doing To Be or Not to Be in a blockbuster.
I've not seen it, but I love Ethan Hawke. I just think I agree with you guys, and especially as an actor, I don't like comparing, but I just found it interesting, and I'm going to have to check out Ethan Hawke.
Yeah, no, it's a great scene. Ethan Hawke playing Hamlet, honestly, is probably closer to reality than a lot of the screen Hamlets I've seen, because he's such a brooding brat in that film. And it's actually a really good cut of Hamlet. It's less than 2 hours. Bill Murray's in it. Bill
Murray is in that. Bill Murray is in that film.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a weird indie Hamlet.
Yes.
Like taking place in a very contemporary for the 2000. When it came out in New York City, and Ethan Hawke is just such a brooding. He's totally, reality bites in it.
I was just going to say,
a really good job.
He's got that down with, exactly.
And that's a good interpretation of Hamlet. He's kind of just a self-absorbed dickhead, and I think that's why I think that's why so many men want to play him.
I didn't like the film, but it was enjoyable. It was just one of those good films that I enjoyed watching.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen Richard Burton on stage in New York, which is
he's wonderful.
Oh God,
I haven't seen him on stage. Did you see him live, Chase?
No. I saw there's a DVD that you didn't pick up, by the way, Todd, when you were here. But I have a DVD of him on stage. I have a lot of DVDs of old plays from New York. But anyway, Kate, we're on to you.
What was the middle part again?
The middle part is your number 2 actor.
It's a joke. Did anyone get that reference? Fish called Wanda?
Yes, absolutely. I love it.
Okay. That was Kevin Kline's line, not yours.
Yeah.
So number 2 actor would be Bogey. And I think it's self-explanatory. We can move along. I mean, just long of the short of it. I mean, we've mentioned Key Largo, we've mentioned Maltese Falcon, which I still need to see in toto. We've mentioned Casablanca. He's just I mean, he's a leading man, but he brings, and I don't know how to explain it. He's got it,
Yeah.
He's got it. And it's, and his moxie and his kind of swagger. And I love it. Bring it on. Bogey, number 2.
Fantastic. And there's not much to say about Bogart. He's phenomenal. Freeman, you're number 2.
Well, actually, I wanted to say about Bogart, I think the thing that's most remarkable about him is I don't think he's a very good actor, but he chose, one, he picked phenomenal scripts, and 2, he has, exactly like Kate said, he has it. It's like in Casablanca, he's like the ultimate, like, we could all wish to be him, be Rick in that movie.
I failed to mention too, Treasure of Sierra Madre, right?
And I think Treasure of the Sierra Madre is the one that I've seen of his. I haven't seen all of his stuff, but the one of his where I'm like, that is his best performance. Like that one, he really shows up in that one to like, and I don't think he's bad by any means, but I think he's an actor that had a lot more charisma than necessarily talent. But I think one of those actors that really carried it through with that.
I feel like Humphrey Bogart would like show up on the set with a pack of cigarettes and a drink, and he'd be like,
and a hangover.
I'm just gonna be me, I'm just. Yeah. But that's the thing. He's an institution, that he didn't need to act like anybody else because everyone else wanted to be him. So,
I think
he's just like.
I think he had. I agree, but I would also mention, I think he had an incredibly strong and committed work ethic. That is the vibe I get from him.
Yeah,
watch some films of outtakes.
No bullshit.
Watch some films of outtakes, and you see how serious he took his acting. If he blew a line, he was not happy with himself, and very specific about what he was doing.
I've yet to meet a Capricorn that doesn't have a strong work ethic, and it comes through regardless of how anyone feels. Todd's laughing. Well, Todd, you're so hard on yourself, so I'm not going to even listen to what you have to say. Todd's a Capricorn for anyone listening to this. And that doesn't surprise me, Dennis, because I think it comes through watching him as an actor and you being an actor, right? Like it comes through in his acting, his commitment, I think.
Well, there's a lot to his acting. I mean, I've taught acting for years. So when I watch Bogart work, I mean, everything is just so precise, and he makes it look easy. And that's the key. When somebody does great things, you think, yeah, I could do that. I can go home and do that. But just the whole thing about not stepping on himself, not doing two things at once. I mean, it's or if he does, it's entirely choreographed, but it doesn't look choreographed. And I think that's maybe what Freeman is feeling about him, is it looks too easy. It looks like he just showed up. But boy, I'll tell you, when you look at his scenes and analyze what the hell he's doing, his eyes,
it's very, very deliberate.
I agree with what you guys are saying about him too. I think a good contemporary comparison to Humphrey Bogart in terms of both his persona and also work ethic, like what he does makes it look easy, is Jack Nicholson. Yes. I think Jack Nicholson, in a lot of ways, he's not like Humphrey Bogart because he's original. He's one of the most original performers of the 20th century and into the 21st. Everyone knows Jack Nicholson. But like Humphrey Bogart, he is incredibly committed to his craft, or was. I mean, he's kind of unofficially like retired. But he made some. A friend of mine once thought that he was actually a pretty bad actor because he just seemed like he was Jack all the time. Well, of course he's going to be Jack. He's Jack Nicholson. He's who he is. But within the performances, and I think this is the same as Humphrey Bogart. Within the performances, you see a craftsmanship and a dedication to excellence. So that even though, yes, whenever Jack Nicholson is in any movie, he's Jack Nicholson. Whenever Humphrey Bogart is in any movie, he's Humphrey Bogart. But you see what the actor themselves are doing within the performance, and you do see tremendous talent and tremendous work ethic. So
we have to
Jack Nicholson's phenomenal.
Yeah. We have to remember that particularly back in the studio system, that you ain't going to get work if the audience doesn't recognize you. So Paul Muni, nobody's brought up Paul Muni at all. And, that's because all of his parts, he basically, and Lon Chaney, I mean, in the silent films, you couldn't recognize him. And, actors figured out right away that if if they don't recognize me, then they're not going to show up for my films, to see, oh, yeah, I like to. And so people like Bogart or, basically almost everybody are going to be playing versions of themselves because that's what's saleable. It's not saleable otherwise. The studios are going to go, why should I cast you? Nobody knows who you are. They're not going to come see you. So they're playing against that. And I think a lot of that would suppress some of the things that we would recognize as great acting, because otherwise they ain't going to be cast. And they're looking out for their career first of all, I think, and then once they get cast, now they're looking out for their acting abilities and what they show in that regard. But anyway.
Well
Okay.
said. Yeah.
So Freeman, we're on number 2 for you.
So I was going to say Cary Grant because I think he's one of the most effortlessly charismatic performers of all time. But I actually did want to throw out because the conversation that we just had about Humphrey Bogart made me remember somebody who I have not seen nearly enough work of, but Edward G. Robinson.
Oh yeah.
Because recently I showed some friends Double Indemnity, which I believe was one of Todd's picks, and they were so taken with Edward G. Robinson because he's so likable in that movie. As this weird, and he's another guy who always sort of played Edward G. Robinson, but he has such a memorable presence and voice and distinctive personality. And it's funny because I'm looking at the 2 movies I can remember seeing him in are Double Indemnity, where he plays kind of the moral heart of the movie, and Key Largo, where he plays a total son of a bitch. And it's fascinating because they're not wildly different performances, but he is able to fully deliver on both sides of the good guy bad guy spectrum, which I just think is a very interesting and valuable talent. So Edward G. Robinson.
His model. I rewatched Double Indemnity after I think our last episode, and his monologue when his boss is acting like what or believes what happened was not an accident, and Keys, the character he plays, Keys, is going on about, I've seen every type of insurance claim known to man, and he's going through every single one, and he's kind of taking court between his boss, who he answers to, and then of Fred McMurray, and he's kind of playing the chorus to both of them, and his delivery of that entire monologue is mesmerizing. Absolutely mesmerizing. The way he speaks, his movements, his expressions. He's phenomenal in it, and I agree with you. He's like another one of those. Oh, I know that face. I know that. But you wouldn't exactly say he like.
Nobody holds a cigar like him.
No one holds a cigar like him. But you wouldn't exactly say like he disappears into his roles.
It's been a while since I've seen Double Indemnity, and I really remember Stanwyck and being and McMurray. I think it was in that. Yeah. I just love that film. I need to go back and look and remember who Robinson was. He was Fred McMurray's boss, was he not, or partner?
Like his boss and friend,
kind of mentor, sort of.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's the best thing about his character in that movie is like he'll just drop little things about like how his life is completely ruined by his work ethic. Like he almost got married once, and then he did like an insurance background check on the girl and got her arrested or something. It's crazy.
It's kind of psychotic.
He would be such a piece of shit if he wasn't played by Edward G. Robinson, and you're like, oh, I love that guy, even though he's a total mess.
Well, fantastic. Okay, Dennis, you're number 2.
Yeah, I can be brief about this because we've identified several of these people before, but I went through Charles Laughton, who made 20 films in the 40s. Jimmy Stewart, who's considered by many to be the greatest actor of American film. And he did Shop Around the Corner, Philadelphia Story, It's a Wonderful Life, Rope in the 40s. Great some great films, but it's really tough to get past Grant and Bogart. So I have to pick Cary Grant as number 2. You know, and for the films that I discovered recently, well, Bishop's Wife was one really brilliant low-key comedy done by him, considering, you know, a lot of his stuff is really broad. But that was very touching, very funny. I mean, I laughed out loud in a couple of places, but he's not playing it for laughs, not at all. It's just it's the timing. And if you haven't seen that's that's pretty too, Cary Grant and Drag. Um, so yeah, there you have it. And yeah, I've seen all those movies bunches of times. His 40s movies, and you know, he only gets better with age. I mean, 50s and 60s still does great stuff. But anyway, that's my number two.
Fantastic. I love Cary Grant. That was my number two. My number one is Humphrey Bogart. I know you guys are going to hate me, but I think he was a phenomenal actor. I really enjoyed his acting.
I agree.
I think, as Dennis said, he approached it from a very methodical way of acting that I just enjoyed. I think he got into the role of Rick. He got into the role, I forget the character's name in Sierra Madre, and he delved into it, and he played that kind of stoic role as Rick. You know, he's battling the Nazis. He's battling, you know, his love for Ilsa, I'm sorry. And, you know, I think it all comes out in just his facial movements. He doesn't overact like a lot of actors do. I think he was very subtly appropriate in his roles. I really loved Bogart's acting. I really did. If I were a director, I would cast him if you had the right role. So anyway, that's my number one.
He passes the Chase seal of approval for casting, you know. Humphrey's like, finally.
You know, I
beyond the grave. He's like, finally.
You know, I never worked under Dennis, except I think I took a couple of aside things. And Dennis is a good acting coach. But my acting coach was Bob Meyer. And I don't know if you guys know Bob Meyer, but Dennis does, of course. Bob died last year, God damn it. But and Bob Meyer was John Malkovich's acting coach. Oh. And you know, we would talk about, you know, whether it was what's the Mammoth play that Nickel Buffalo,
American Buffalo.
American Buffalo. Thank you. Working with Mamet, working with Malkovich, working with Bob Meyer, I just appreciate good acting when I see it on the screen, and I see it with Humphrey. You know, yes, did he bring Humphrey with him? Yeah, he did. Does George Clooney bring George with him? Does Jack bring Jack with him? Yeah, they do. But I see Jack in The Shining as Jack in Five Easy Pieces as two different Jacks.
Yeah,
I really do.
And you believe both of them.
And I believe both of them. And I believe both of them.
Yep.
So Humphrey is my number one actor for the 40s. Yes. So who's number one?
Number one for me is Spencer Tracy.
Ooh, we differ on that.
Hey.
So let's go down Spencer Tracy's road.
Yes. Well, he had his whole slew of films in the 40s. But
you know, he had you know, he had 6 less films in the 40s than Cary Grant, just to let you know. I counted. I did the logistics.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm looking now on IMDb. That's funny. Wow. Yeah, they both put out quite a bit.
Oh, yes, they did.
Working. I guess that was
Spencer Tracy.
the studio
Spencer
system.
Tracy hit me with Adam's Rib. That's the one that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm so glad that you told me to watch that. I liked that movie and I loved his performance. But something that he always has, starting in like Woman of the Year, which is like is that 42? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's the earliest one in the 40s that I saw of his. What he consistently has is naturalism. And I feel like I could pluck him out of the 40s and put him in a movie now with like Robert De Niro or something, and he would fit right in. And you wouldn't see a difference between the styles because he has this very specific inner world. And I don't know, there's something about that specificity in an actor that the camera is almost like an X-ray and it can see you thinking. And if you are thinking real thoughts, it just, I don't know, there's something about it that comes across. And he always has that very, very good technique. And just something that for me personally, that's my taste. Like, that's what I like.
Well, that's one of the reasons I loved Adam's Rib is because him and Catherine had such a great rapport together.
They did.
And you could see the mechanisms going on in both of their brains when they're having all this trouble with one another.
Yeah.
It was like, what the fuck's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah, I know, you almost feel like they're improvising and you can't tell. And that's what's great. That's what's great. And how much can we say that really about actors in the 40s? Everything was so still sort of stuck in the stage kind of vibe a lot of the time. And just that cadence. But they really hit this like natural talking over each other, you know, little touches, little, you know, hits that you're like, oh, I bet that wasn't staged, you know, or it could have been. They're just that good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
fantastic.
Yeah, he's my numero uno. Yeah.
Numero uno. Okay, some honorable mentions you want to mention?
Oh man, who else was on my list? You know, Humphrey Bogart has grown on me. I used to hate him actually when I was growing up. I didn't understand why he was cast all the time as a leading man. But as I've grown older, he's grown on me. And I think he has a similar thing to Spencer Tracy where he's got a very specific inner life. But for me, it doesn't always read as much as Spencer Tracy's. So he's an honorable mention. He's up there.
Now, Humphrey Bogart is my number one choice.
Really?
Simply, I mean, Treasure, the Sierra Madres, Key Largo, Sleep, Maltese Falcon, Casablanca. I mean, the films that he did in the 40s were just up there for me. And he was the star in all of those.
Do you feel like he only did one?
And Have and Have Not, which I didn't even mention.
Yes, of course. But do you feel like he only ever did one kind of note of a character?
Yes, it was, no, Treasure of the Sierra Madres is not.
He's very different in that
That's
one?
a different note.
Okay.
That's a different note.
I'll have to watch that then.
Oh, you haven't seen Treasure of the Sierra Madres?
No, I haven't.
Oh, no, that is a totally different note. Key Largo is a different note.
Yeah.
If you go with The Big Sleep, Maltese Falcon, Have and Have Not, he plays this strong character.
Right.
But he is a weak character in Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Okay.
And also in Key Largo, he plays a little devious character. Well, Dennis loved Key Largo. You've seen it, haven't you?
I believe so, but years ago, Dennis showed it to me when I was a teenager.
Okay.
Yeah.
Humphrey Bogart did a lot of great things.
Yeah, he's very good.
He's my number one, by the way.
I understand why. Yes, but he's an honorable mention for me, for sure.
Okay.
My number one 1940s actor is Jimmy Stewart. And I'm going to include, even though it came out in 1939, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, because it's a stellar performance, and I'm fine with including it in his just absolute incredible run in the 1940s. You know, and Dennis has touched on it too with Philadelphia Story and Rope, and his, you know, I think it led into and of course It's a Wonderful Life. What I like about Stewart, especially in retrospect, is he does, Tom Hanks has been able to capture the Jimmy Stewart magic. It's his own. He's not like aping Jimmy Stewart, but he's America's everyman. He's somebody everybody could relate to. And Jimmy really had an incredible screen presence as that, but he also had just such a dark side that he did not shy away from. And I've mentioned before, and it's a Wonderful Life. You see it when he's at the end of his rope, and it's very real where he's pulling all of this pain from. And that's brave. I think that's brave as an actor, especially in what I think it's A Wonderful Life came out, 1948, 46.
Yeah.
So, and that was back when you absolutely did not talk about any type of PTSD or mental trauma, emotional trauma from the war, and which of course Stewart was in along with Capra. And I think being able to see a very American and relatable actor go to the depths emotionally that he dared to do in an era that you didn't talk about that sort of thing. And especially for a movie that ultimately didn't do well and wasn't recognized until decades later. I think Jimmy Stewart was quite versatile and showed it even more later on past this decade with Vertigo. In what a sick fuck he was. And he embraced that fully in Vertigo too. You had no trace of George Bailey or Mr. Smith from, and that was the beauty of, and I love that Hitchcock, who was a sick fuck himself, would keep working with Stewart. And in fact, from what I understand, Vertigo was where they diverged because Hitchcock infamously made a comment that he thought in retrospect that Stewart was too old for the role. But Stewart's performance in it is phenomenal. And when he did Rear Window and
Rear Window, yeah.
But Spirit of St. Louis.
Spirit of St. Louis. And
yeah, acting in a box for most of the film, and he pulls it off.
And I think I would go so far as to say, Stewart upon first glance has the hallmarks of the actors we've been talking about, like Humphrey Bogart, Jack Nicholson, where as soon as you see Jimmy Stewart, you're like, okay. I mean, Dana Carvey did great imitations of him,
But let's get him.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's a very recognizable personality. But I think that he was a very versatile actor underneath the persona. And you can see it in those scenes in It's a Wonderful Life, where he's sitting at the bar, praying that he gets out of this. You see the despair in his eyes, and he doesn't look like he's acting. He looks like he's having a moment in character. And I think he's just a fascinating performer, and of course, just a lovable personality. When I don't know if you ever saw him, I think he was on Johnny Carson in his later years, shortly before he passed, and he read a poem about his dog that had passed recently, and how much he loved his dog. And that to me is like quintessential Jimmy Stewart right there.
Yeah.
He was quite a guy, and I think his reign during the 1940s is just absolutely stellar. So that was my number one.
Interesting.
Absolutely agree. Yeah.
Interesting comparison with Bogart and Jimmy Stewart, both really skinny guys.
Yeah.
And if you see them without their clothes on, they don't look leading men like, but when you dress them up, they look really good. Bogart said once they wanted to cast him as a boxer, he said, "Look at this physique. Nobody's going to buy me as a boxer." Jimmy Stewart, I've been watching movies, and Grace will say, "He's really skinny."
Why, Dennis, why are you looking at these pictures of them nude?
Well, we all each have our little fetishes.
Nothing wrong with that.
Go ahead, Freeman.
Oh, I was just going to say, it was mentioned earlier, but Jimmy Stewart in Rope is also a very interesting, because it's sort of
yes,
his proto Vertigo performance, because he plays this really bitter shit in that movie who is forced to sort of come to that movie is very interesting in a lot of different ways, but the way that he's forced to come to terms with like sort of how his teachings and philosophy taken to the extreme, and that entire dynamic is very interesting. And
It's really
him and
like a
Hitchcock did some
stage
things
performance
that
too, because they shoot it in 2 takes.
yeah.
So you have to be, a film actor is not going to pull that off unless you have some stage experience too.
And I also don't think everybody in Rope does necessarily pull it off. I don't think Rope's one of Hitchcock's more successful movies, but I think Jimmy Stewart in that movie is.
Yeah.
I love Jimmy Stewart. Todd, I couldn't agree more with everything you said. I think that he was actually my number 2. It's hard for me as well as an actor to like I actually had a tough time with female. I just in that era for some reason. But I had a bunch for men, and he ends up in my honorable mention. But Jimmy Stewart, I don't know. Side note, I think it's more important to be a good person than to like do anything you can to make it in this business. And I do think Jimmy Stewart had an incredible work ethic, was incredibly talented, incredibly dedicated. And I think he was a good person. I remember Sam Elliott, who was, I think him and Tom Selleck were 2 of the last contracted actors at MGM, actually. I think it was MGM contracted. It was like not done after them. They were the last 2. And he talks about Sam Elliott. He's kind of, quiet. And he says, actors sometimes will do anything they can. It's so fucked up. But it's true what he's saying. He said they'll do anything they can to throw you off. And he was, not impressed with it. He was not condoning it. He was just calling it as it was. And he said he did a scene with Jimmy Stewart. When they do the turnaround shots, normally they have a stand-in. I have stories off camera for you on that. Not with any of those 2, but I've done enough stand-in work. And he said, Jimmy Stewart stayed, and I believe it was raining, and he stood there while they did the turnaround shot. This is Sam Elliott's memory of James Stewart. And he stood there for his James Stewart's POV shot so they could get the camera on, so he could get the reaction that he needed having Jimmy Stewart in that scene with him, even though they didn't need him, even though he wasn't being shown on camera. So I think tremendous actor, amazing talent, loved his work, he also had it. He brought all of that to his work, and he had so much excitement. And I mean, he's phenomenal, and he'll probably show up in other decades again. But I think you pointed out the story about I think it was on Johnny Carson with the dog passing. And that was a story I had to share just with another human that Sam Elliott brought up. And I think, for me, it's important to be a good person. And I liked that shows through in his work. He's magic. I love Jimmy Stewart. Magic.
Fantastic. Kate, now you're number 1.
Well, we'll do autumn HMs after, right, Tracy?
Yes,
Number 1, you guys, this is not going to be a surprise. You know how much I love him. I've talked about how he, along with Joseph Cotten, when he's in a film, it kind of brings it to a new level of excitement, and that is Peter Laurie. I think the ultimate actor is a character actor. And I think a lot of who we talked about, even though they were also leading men, could couple as character actors. But Peter Laurie, Joseph Cotten, Peter Laurie is my number 1, but just the ultimate character actor. And not in this decade, but playing in M, a serial killer, Arsenic and Old Lace, where he's kind of like this, slapstick sidekick. I've seen a bunch of his movies where he's only in like 20 minutes of it. They had HFA had a retrospective. A lot of them were from the 50s on Peter Laurie in Peter Laurie films. And in each one, he was, I mean, yeah, you're always going to bring who you are to it, but yeah, he's something else. I love my Peter Laurie, so he's my number one. And I think I've talked about him enough in the other episodes to not go on ad nauseum.
Well, I'm gonna add something about Peter Laurie. I mean, I saw M, which is a '30s film, but I saw M a long, 100 years ago. And Kate, when you mentioned M again, Fritz Lang's film with Peter Laurie as the serial killer, I had to go back and rewatch it. And I just rewatched it the other day, and it's a really good film. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for mentioning that. And it was fun to see Peter Laurie work as that serial killer. He did a good job.
And isn't it interesting with a lot of Laurie films, he's only in like 10 or 15 or 20 minutes of these films.
You don't see him for 20, 30 minutes of the film.
That there was one film, I'm forgetting the name, I believe it was in the 50s. I saw it with one of my girlfriends, and he plays he either was or was suspected, I don't want to give it away, a murderer in it. And he was phenomenal. And then the rest of the movie was not very good. But he was incredible in it.
Wasn't he in Maltese Falcon? Dennis, you'll know.
Yes, he is in Maltese Falcon. Yeah. He's in Casablanca. He's in
Casablanca, of course, yes.
Yep, but he's in the Maltese Falcon as well.
Yeah.
And also, your favorite director, Charlie Chaplin, once said he's the best actor of all time. After seeing him,
that's like, those are soul connections, all of it. I believe that.
It was after seeing him in the 1935 movie Mad Love, which is a really fun, goofy horror movie where he plays a surgeon.
Well, anyway, Freeman, you're up for your number one actor.
So my number one actor is, I don't really know how to pronounce his name. He's an Austrian actor, and it's Anton, I want to say Volbruck, who I think his most famous role is actually in a movie I haven't seen, which is Gaslight.
You haven't seen Gaslight?
I haven't seen Gaslight.
Oh, watch it, Freeman.
He's
phenomenal in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's phenomenal and the reason why I know him best is he's in two Powell and Pressburger movies, which are The Red Shoes in 48, and the one that I want to talk about, which is The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp in 1943. He's also in a really cool little thriller called
Who did he play in The Red Shoes?
He's the owner of the company, the guy who falls in love with Moira Shearer that kind of ruins her life. Yeah, and
I visualize him now.
In Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, which is this incredible Powell and Pressburger kind of war epic that was made, I think, in the midst of, it was 43, so it was made in the midst of World War II. There was kind of a call to English sort of civility in the midst of war, and he plays Theo Kretschmar-Schuroff, who's this German officer who has a running friendship with the main character Candy in the movie. And there's this one scene that's like maybe the best scene of any 1940s movie ever, where Kretschmar-Schuroff's trying to defect from Germany at the onset of World War II when the Nazis are taking over, and they're interrogating him, and he delivers this monologue about sort of how he had a family in Germany, how he loved Germany, and then his sons became Nazis, his wife died, and it's this incredibly tragic story that he's telling, but he tells it with this really private pain that I don't think I've seen anything else from the 40s. I haven't seen much else from any other decade. That scene really is one of the incredible standouts of cinema for me. So yeah, Anton Walbrook is my number one choice.
Fantastic. I don't have much to say about that. I remember him in Gaslight, and now that you mention him, I remember him in Red Shoes. I don't remember as an actor really picking up anything there. So I'm gonna have to relook at them.
Look at Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. It will also come up again when we talk about actresses, but yeah, it's a really great movie with a really great performance by him.
Fantastic. I'm looking him up right now. Dennis, you're number one.
Well, keep it brief. Bogart. If you haven't seen, we talked about, about his acting, like it or not, but he starts out as a gangster in Dead End. He plays a gangster in Petrified Forest in the 30s, and then by the time you get to the 40s, he starts to transition into leading man. But High Sierra, he's still a gangster there, but he's a gangster with a heart, and I really love that film. Ida Lupino's in that. And the other one that people haven't seen a lot of is Dark Passage, where he plays a guy who's it's all from his point of view, and at least the first half of the movie is as if we're seeing it out of his eyes. But the Dark Passage is the fact that he can't see. So it's an interesting twist. I haven't seen it in a while. I don't remember exactly how that fits together, but yeah, those are two that don't get seen a lot, but are really good. So there you have it.
I don't think we need to spend any more time going over. We hope you enjoyed our podcast, The Love of Film. In episode 4 tonight, we discussed our favorite actors of the 1940s. For further information about our podcast, please go to www.leftbankfilms.com/theloveoffilm.